It's not an attack on our democracy. It's Donald Trump looking out for Donald Trump. It's a once-in-a-lifetime occurrence.
I don't know that I agree with you. To be fair, with all due respect, one doesn't have to be brilliant to attempt a coup.
I disagree with that. As somebody who has helped plan coup d'etat, not here, but other places, it takes a lot of work.
In an interview with Jake Tapper on CNN, Trump's former national security advisor and notorious warmonger John Bolton admitted to planning multiple coups d'etat. I'm Yasmin Khan with Rebel HQ, and when Jake Tapper asserted that one doesn't need to be brilliant to plan a coup, in this case one referring to Trump, Bolton pushed back as someone who's a bit of an expert on coups. He said, as someone who has helped plan coup d'etat, not here, but other places, it takes a lot of work. While this isn't really a shocking reveal, it's still jarring to hear it said out loud with such candor. He wants credit for his expertise in planning coups. He wants to be seen as the authority on destabilizing governments, and to be fair to Bolton, he's earned it. This story is sort of twofold though. There's John Bolton, and there's the US's propensity for planning and supporting coups abroad. First, there's Bolton's tenure and reputation as a man who has no problem with sending Americans into battle on foreign soil, despite the fact that he himself has never served. While he's not technically a draft dodger, he opted to sign up for the Maryland National Guard instead of enlisting in the 70s. It wasn't a guarantee that he wouldn't see battle, but the likelihood of him doing so was far less. Also, it was a difficult thing to get into at the time. You had to be pretty well connected. On the matter, he actually said, "I confess I had no desire to die in a Southeast Asian rice paddy. I considered the war in Vietnam already lost." I don't imagine any of those soldiers wanted to do so either, but unlike Bolton, they weren't really given a choice.
I do have to ask you also, your comment yesterday on CNN about coups and orchestrating them, it's getting a lot of play, as you know. What would you like to say to that?
Well, I think there are a lot of snowflakes out there that don't understand what you need to do to protect the United States. I'm not going to get into specifics. I did write about Venezuela in my memoir. And I think that any president that's not willing to do what it takes to protect the interest of the American people needs to have some counseling.
The other side of the story involves the fact that the U.S. has a history of agitating foreign governments. We know this, but John Bolton has been a central figure in some of the most recent ones. Now, I don't like speaking in absolutes because there really is no such thing as an absolute, especially not in matters of geopolitics, but coups d'etat are almost always nightmare scenarios. Even in the most severe cases of fascism and dictatorship, overthrowing a leader is not without huge and significant risks, not just to the nation's governmental structure, but to its people. They typically lead to widespread instability within the nation, instability that can be hard to bounce back from, even with foreign aid. Of course, taking foreign aid isn't without its risks either. Nations become beholden to the powers keeping them afloat, which, as you can imagine, is often a precarious situation for already unstable nations to be in, especially when those foreign nations are usually only helping out because they're getting something out of it, whether that's politically or by attaining resources. The end result, more often than not, might look better than where they were before, but the impacts of misguided foreign intervention are often felt long after the big blow-up occurs. In the case of Venezuela, Bolton will almost gleefully admit that it was a failed coup, but he's happy to blame the failure on everyone but himself.
I do want to ask a follow-up. When we were talking about what is capable, what you need to do to be able to plan a coup, and you cited your expertise having planned coups.
I'm not going to get into the specifics, but
Successful coups?
well, I wrote about Venezuela in the book, and it turned out not to be successful. Not that we had all that much to do with it, but I saw what it took for an opposition to try and overturn an illegally elected president, and they failed. The notion that Donald Trump was half as competent as the Venezuelan opposition is laughable. But I think there's another...
I feel like there's other stuff you're not telling me, though.
I'm sure there is.
So to my earlier point, Venezuela was in a pretty bad way under the leadership of Nicolas Maduro. There were a lot of reasons for him to no longer be in charge of the country. To name a few of those reasons, Its people were suffering from high inflation, basic goods were hard to come by, crime was skyrocketing, a side effect of poverty, not necessarily a symptom in and of itself. There was widespread corruption within the government. The country wasn't generating enough power to keep the lights on or to keep businesses open. And Maduro's election was contested from the beginning, and its people weren't getting adequate health care. But with all of that, here's the reason Bolton gave to Fox News back in 2019 for why he wanted to coup Venezuela. He said, "We're in conversation with major American companies now. It will make a big difference to the US economically if we could have American oil companies really invest in and produce the oil capabilities in Venezuela." It's not about protecting democracy. It's not about helping the people who are visibly and tangibly suffering. It was about protecting the oil interests of the United States. Bolton has been strangely uncaring about the lives he destroys in his global rampages, but the reason for that seems to be that he doesn't exactly have a guilty conscience about any of it. I already mentioned that he blamed the failed coup attempt in Venezuela on practically every other department in the Trump administration, even though those departments seem to have valid concerns about the course of action that Bolton was proposing. For example, an article from Brookings states, Bolton is also contemptuous of those fearing that tightening sanctions would impose a humanitarian toll on the Venezuelan poor. The hard-charging national security advisor ridicules the State Department for closing the U.S. Embassy in Caracas, quote, for being so hung up on safety issues. He also denies any responsibility for the civilian deaths that his actions and influence contributed to in Iraq. Here's an interaction he had with Mehdi Hassan. Leading up to that clip, Bolton, who was a vocal advocate of invading Iraq in the early 2000s, claims that the war in Iraq really only lasted a few weeks until Saddam Hussein was overthrown, at which point the US should have handed everything back over to the Iraqis, who by then had no leader, to make decisions for themselves. You can't go into a foreign government, overthrow its leader, and then expect the locals to pick up your pieces. It doesn't work like that. It never works like that. But in John Bolton's mind or soul or whatever, he carries no guilt for any of the aftermath that followed. Foreign intervention in governments, whether by the US or other major global powers, is never about being champions of democracy or protectors of human rights. We only ever intervene if a nation's instability affects our own economic or geopolitical stability. Still, we pretend that we're operating with some sort of higher God-given purpose, that we have to help those people that need our help. That it's our responsibility as a wealthy nation with an increasingly large military to do so. People like John Bolton sell the American people a bag of goods so that the public will support the initiative, so that the American public can feel good about what our country is doing abroad. George W. Bush said that the 9/11 terrorists were jealous of our freedom, which is why we, for some reason, had to invade Iraq. He never even bothered to connect the two, and what's worse, no one really asked him to. He took advantage of a heartbroken, scared, and vulnerable population to achieve his political goals. I guess all that I'm asking is that we call a thing what it is. The fact that John Bolton said what he said out loud shouldn't have been a surprise to anyone, and yet it's still a major headline. We're so shocked when people are actually truthful and transparent because we're so comfortable with the lies. And when I say we, I mean collectively. The people who aren't into politics, the passive observers, the ones who are too busy living their lives to dive too deeply into what's going on in the Middle East. I don't mean that as a disparaging statement either, especially because I imagine that that is the majority of Americans. It takes a lot of time and effort to think about these things, which is why people like myself do the work that we do. We think about these things all day long, and yeah, it sucks most of the time, and yeah, we're hard to be around sometimes, but somehow, somewhere, and to someone, these things matter. All right, thanks so much. Please give this a like if you got something out of it, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this from my co-rebels and myself. Okay. Oh, and follow me on Instagram and TikTok at YazK with 5 Z's.